Yes, welcome into the camp. We are in Platteville, as you can see. We're getting just done with the final practice for the Badgers down here before they head back to Madison. And it was an extended practice. It was more than 2 hours, and it was a lot of scrimmage action. But the big story coming out of tonight is the quarterbacks. I think, Jesse, certainly Wisconsin appears to have at least pointed themselves in the direction of a starting quarterback in Tyler Van Dyke. He took all the first team reps tonight. I know we talked to Luke Fickell afterwards and that there was a plan that Braden Locke was going to get some as well, but that did not happen as opposed to every other practice we've seen, which they were going back and forth, and Tyler Van Dyke was getting some work with the twos, but that did not happen tonight. Tyler Van Dyke, all the reps with the ones, and it feels like they haven't made a decision. They're certainly leaning a certain way.
Yeah, this is absolutely a notable development that Tyler handled all the one reps for the first time that we've seen, not only this preseason, but dating back to the spring, because Van Dyke and Braden Locke have split those reps. And to me, it felt like it was trending in this direction for a little bit for the reasons that we've laid out on previous shows. Obviously, Tyler's arm strength and accuracy stand out, as well as his ability to have some success as a ball carrier in the RPO game. But it felt tonight like the offense was really humming when Tyler was in there. And again, they still have more practices to make a final decision, even if there won't necessarily be an announcement from the staff. They're going to be back in Madison starting practices on Tuesday. There will be 5 more practices that are scheduled to be open to reporters through next Saturday, which is a scrimmage that'll take them to about 2 weeks before the season opener. But Van Dyke handling the one reps, certainly notable. And when you're talking about the rotation that was planned, according to Luke, from when we talked to him initially, what they wanted was maybe Matire to handle some of the second team reps. That's not how it played out. If he had handled some of the twos, then Braden would have earned some of those ones. Instead, it went strictly Tyler Van Dyke with the ones, Braden Locke with the twos, maybe Matire with the threes.
You buy that? They have opportunity. Again, I shouldn't say do you buy that. I get what Luke is saying, but they have the ability to control everything that happens on this field. And if they wanted to give Braden Locke some 2 reps tonight, I think we would have seen, or I should say Braden Locke some 1 reps tonight. We would have seen Braden Locke with the ones, but we didn't see that tonight. Again, they have another scrimmage coming up as they're getting back in practice, and we potentially could see Braden Locke get 1 reps there. But this is kind of what we always thought. Going all the way back to spring, what we've seen in fall camp, kind of feels like this is the way it was always going to go. So, again, I know they have a 1A and 1B in Luke's mind, but it feels like that 1A is Tyler Van Dyke, and I don't envision them playing 2 quarterbacks this year.
Unless they had completely different skill sets, which we've seen in other programs, no, I would imagine you're going to roll with 1. Now, Luke did say he feels very good. One of the things he feels as though he has learned coming out of Platteville is that they have 2 capable quarterbacks, quality quarterbacks, and it would certainly appear that they're in a better position with the top 2 quarterbacks than where they stood last season, which makes a lot of sense because it was Tanner Mordecai. Braden Locke was your number 2. He had never played in a college game. Now he at least has those 3 starts, that half against Iowa, and then an entire offseason to better understand this system. And he has had his moments as well, but no surprise in my mind, at least, that Tyler Van Dyke is starting to emerge.
Can we talk about a little bit of what you saw from him tonight that stood out? Because I thought that there were it wasn't perfect by any stretch. There were a few throws that I'm sure he would like back. Braden Locke, obviously the same way. There were a couple of interceptions that he would like back. And then certainly Tyler Van Dyke with a throw in a 2-minute drill. They were humming down the field. And Garrison Saladay, the star of the scrimmage for the defense, he was all over the place. And Owen Arnett, obviously, as well. But Garrison Saladay popped the ball up, and Owen Arnett came down with it. But I thought Tyler Van Dyke had a couple of really impressive throws, especially when targeting Will Pauling.
Yeah, Will had another big day. There's, from what I recall, there's a 14-yard touchdown over the middle. Tretch Kakahuna caught a touchdown pass. And it's worth pointing out to the viewers and the listeners that the way they structured this particular scrimmage was a little bit different because they had the first-team offense going against the second-team defense and the second-team offense going against the first-team defense. So it's understandable why the people who are working with the ones on either side might have had more success. Nonetheless, that was the structure that was put in place, and it felt like Tyler certainly took advantage of it. It feels like to me that he just has more confidence in himself, in this offense, and you're starting to see it click a little bit more, which can only be a good thing for this team.
Yes. And again, the other part of this is that we don't that we don't actually get to see because they're not tackling the quarterback is the run game. And there were a couple of opportunities where he was able to get on the edge. Now there were also a couple of sacks because I thought the outside rushers were fantastic. But just cleaning up the quarterbacks here, Tyler Van Dyke, and I know I hate making this comparison. It's a horrible comparison, but I'm going to do it anyways. I shouldn't say a comparison. I'm not saying they're the same thing, but the play that stood out to me was just this little 9-yard, 10-yard out to Bryson Green for a first down. And it's something that you think was just so easy, but it reminds me of watching Aaron Rodgers and Vontae Adams who played together forever. We're at the top of the game, best quarterback, best wide receiver, and it felt like back of the hand. They could just, anytime they wanted it, they just go out there and get 10 yards because they had that play in the back of their pocket, or just in their back pocket, and be able to use it whenever. Tyler Van Dyke and Bryson Green are not Aaron Rodgers and Vontae Adams. I get that, but it takes some work to get that to be on the same page and make that work. And it was just right where it needed to be. Bryson coming out of his break, the ball being right where it needed to be for a first down. And I think that to me was a sign of where things are going for those two.
We've seen multiple instances this preseason where Tyler's just put the ball right on the money. If it's a back shoulder fade, if it's between multiple defenders on the sideline, if it's over the middle, he just has that arsenal in him. Now, obviously, he needs to be able to stay healthy and play the way that he did a couple of years ago, but it does feel like things are at least starting to fall into place for where they hoped he would be and potentially this offense. We'll have to see what happens when the games start, of course.
Exactly. Again, there were some people commenting when we did our mailbag episode the other day about, who's better, is it Tyler Van Dyke or Tanner Mordecai? And I think we had that question. I think we kind of talked about that. Who would we take? And I think we both agreed that this is Tyler Van Dyke's job. And then it's maybe it's a really tough question between the two. But I think Tyler Van Dyke and this offense are going to be better than the offense was last year with Tanner Mordecai, just because everything else around him is going to be better than what it was last year for Tanner Mordecai. If you put Tanner Mordecai in this offense, I think it'd be pretty special. Again, we were saying the same thing last year, but I'm not making any proclamations about this year. All I'm saying is I think Tyler Van Dyke has an opportunity to lead a successful offense, not simply because he's better than Tanner Mordecai, but because the talent around him is better and the scheme around him fits these guys better than it did last year. Now, no guarantees, but that's just the way I feel about it.
Yeah, obviously they've got a lot of the same wide receiver group back, and we've seen some of those guys make significant strides. The running back depth really stands out, and that goes a long way toward helping Tyler and the offensive line, which needs to hold up, especially with that starting group. But he's got so many players who have been in this system for a year that can help him, and it just feels like things have worked a little bit more smoothly this time around. So that's an encouraging sign.
It is. All right, let's talk about some of the guys that stood out tonight. Specifically, let's start on the defensive side of the ball because there were quite a few guys. We'll talk about Garrison Salary, we'll talk about Owen Arnett, but I think we'll start with the outside linebackers, guys that we know are going to be big parts of this defense. They're new. John Pius and Leon Lowry, and you can even throw Sebastian Cheeks in there, who has been moved over to or moved out to outside linebacker with some of the injuries that they're dealing with. But Leon Lowry and John Pius certainly stood out tonight.
No surprise, because we've been seeing those two guys do this since the spring. Pius had 2 sacks, and I think it was a 3-play span. He came off the edge around the right tackle and then shot up the middle and blew up the play. Lowry had a couple of those instances as well. This is part of why I think people are a little bit more bullish about this defense going into this season, because they've got more playmaking ability, and you add in Daryl Peterson. Those 3, to me, are going to be the backbone of that outside linebacker group pretty clearly. And they have moved Sebastian Cheeks now to outside linebacker, which is a new development. And also, we should mention Ernest Willard Jr., who initially came in as a defensive lineman, a big-time recruit, 4-star prospect. And based on what Luke said after practice, he may have found his home. So this doesn't feel like it's a temporary situation because you've lost some outside linebacker depth this preseason. Aaron Witt has been out for a little bit. Luke expects him to be back in a reasonable time frame. And then Thomas Heiberger, I think, had really flashed, really did that in the spring as well as a true freshman early enrollee. There's no definitive timeline, but it does sound as though he'll be out going into the season, however long that may be. So they've been able to shuffle some pieces around. But definitely it starts at the top: Pius, Lowry, Peterson.
Yeah, and again, those two guys blew up some stuff. And that's the other part of this whole scrimmage is guy, if they were counting sacks and moving guys back, and it would have been a tough night. Tough night for the offense, just because of simply some of those guys coming off the edge. But it also, you have to remind people as well that the offensive line is without Riley Mallman at right tackle right now, and they're playing a bunch of younger guys with the backups. That said, I think that also speaks to some of the different stuff that they're able to do with their pressure packages that we saw tonight. And I know that was seen on Saturday when they were down here, when the scrimmage was open to the fans, and some of the stuff that was happening with the defense. They have the ability to pressure with their normal guys, but they also can get after it when it's on 3rd and long. And those guys are certainly going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, they've got a ton of guys that they can rotate, and they've still been doing it. We're 2 weeks into preseason camp, and you can go play to play, and they're putting in 2 guys at outside linebacker, 2 guys at inside linebacker. They just have a lot of options right there.
They do. So those were. Let's talk about Garrison Saladay. And Arnett. Garrison Saladay was everywhere. If you want to name an MVP of tonight's scrimmage, I think he would probably be there.
He might have had. I was joking about this, and I have not tracked the all-star of every practice. It felt like the greatest practice by an individual performer I've seen. I had him down for 3 sacks, a couple stuffs up the middle, and obviously he got his hand up on the Tyler Van Dyke pass that Owen Arnett ended up intercepting. But he started out with the 3s, and then Saladay was getting some run with the 2s. Obviously, this preseason, in the spring too, really is an opportunity for some guys that you may not necessarily see on the field flash and have their moment and maybe prove that they are worthy of getting more of a look. They've got a ton at inside linebacker, like we've talked about, but Saladay had a very good day.
Yeah, Owen Arnett also had the interception off the tip from Saladay, but he also jumped a route of Braden Locke's early in the night. So a couple of really nice plays for them. Offensively, Will Pauling, he did have a fumble, and if you go back and look at the video of Luke Fickell's press conference, you'll see in the back Will Pauling doing some up downs about the 2-minute mark, 3-minute mark, because he also had a fumble during a red zone period that would have been obviously a pretty big play if done in the game. But that said, he also had an amazing day catching the ball. The 2 touchdowns that you already talked about, the one where he went to the ground to catch it over the middle from Tyler Van Dyke, and then obviously the fade to the which was against Owen Arnett, by the way. But Owen did, it was late hands. It was just very late hands. So it didn't even act like the ball was even coming to him until the last minute, and just made a really nice catch on a touchdown. So Will Pauling, I know that do you want to give him the ball 74 times or whatever it was, how many catches he had last year? No, but I also look at him and say, God, I want him to have the ball as much as possible, because he's just an electric playmaker.
When they go full speed, you see the difference. As soon as he gets the ball in his hands, he's off and running. The guy ran a 4.39 40-yard dash, and you can see it out here. And part of the challenge in trying to track this scrimmage is that they spotted the ball at, it felt like, random yardage markers, because I had Will going for maybe a 40-plus yard touchdown after he caught a short pass in the flat. And then the next play, the ball was at the 25-yard line. Having said that, he certainly stood out. It's no surprise. He's coming off a 74-catch season. I think one of the things that's got to be encouraging for this team is that there are players around him who can ease the pressure on him.
Yeah.
Tretch Kahuna, certainly. Bryson Green. CJ Williams has had some really good moments. He caught, and I know we've talked before, the one-on-one or the early competition moments,
yep.
But they started with a competitive drill. It was 11 on 11. They had the offense, I think it was the 3-yard line, and Braden Locke threw a pass up there that CJ, not only was he not out of his break, I don't think he could have possibly known that the ball was in the air, but he turned around and adjusted and found it and caught it. So they do have guys that have been able to show out, at least in flashes.
An amateur videographer caught that you can see on the highlight, or not the highlight, but the video from practice that you can see up on our YouTube page. I don't know who that amateur videographer was. He didn't do a great job of capturing it, but he did capture it. So that's a positive. The other guy that really stood out offensively, and I think there were a number of them, but Katie Yakinelli, I thought. And he's a guy that has, again, kind of like Jackson Aker last week, where we just kind of haven't talked about him. We talked about everybody else. We haven't really talked about him. Had about a 35-yard run down to the 3-yard line that eventually ended up with Braden Locke, I think, to Jackson McGowan for a touchdown. I think that was the possession on that one. But it was a really nice run, and he has kind of been the forgotten man there with all the other talent in that room.
Luke mentioned one of the things he's been most impressed with coming out of this is the depth that they have at running back, which is no surprise. But Cade has put himself in position to at least be in the conversation. When you see Ches being held out of contact drills for a little bit, and he was back tonight and looked like Ches. But it gives some of these other guys an opportunity, and Yakimelli is one of them. He runs with power. I think he's got probably more speed than he gets credit for. He can get around the edge, he can knock guys over, and he had an opportunity to showcase that. But they've got a decision to make on what they want this pecking order to look like. The assumption would be, and I think it is reasonable, is that Ches Malusi and Tawee Walker are your top two. But if you can have a third, what does that look like? Jackson Aiken can do a lot of different things. He can block. Cade Yakimelli is in the conversation. And of course, the two freshmen, Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree, who have really stood out here early and are among the freshmen that Luke talked about afterward, that they're going to need to figure out a way to get them on the field.
Let's talk about some of those young freshmen because when we were down at Big Ten Media Days a couple of weeks ago, asked Luke about some of the true freshmen that might be able to help him, and he wasn't really sure. He did mention the running backs. I think he mentioned some of the young offensive linemen, but we have maybe a little clearer vision now that we're 12 days into camp.
Sure, certainly those two running backs are in that conversation. I would expect them to be on the field in some capacity. They're just too talented not to be. But then you go to the offensive line. Kevin Haywood has been getting first-team reps at right tackle in place of Riley Mallman here for the last handful of practices. Riley's just in a yellow non-contact jersey. It doesn't sound like it's anything that's going to be long-term. But Haywood was getting the second-team reps at left tackle in the spring. So they really threw him into the fire immediately. And then you go down to the second-team offensive line. Because Haywood is with the ones now, that means that Derek Jensen is handling the 2 reps at left tackle. But Colin Coverly is at right guard. Emerson Mandel is at right tackle. And Coverly and Mandel are 2 of the players that Luke said will probably be in the 2 deep. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play day one, but it's notable that they are at least in the 2 deep. And then you can flip over defensively, too. Thomas Heiberger was, before he got hurt, in the mix to play right away, potentially as your number 4 or your number 5 outside linebacker. And I think the most notable development to me, Zach, at least from practice tonight, is seeing Xavier Lucas out there with the 2s at cornerback. Everybody you talk to has been very high on him. Ricardo Hallman, certainly. He is not afraid. He certainly physically does not look like a freshman. And so he has stood out and was one of those names that Luke said, again, they're going to have to figure out a way to get him on the field. They do have a lot of veterans there in front of him, so you can kind of slow play that, but talent rises, and you want to figure out a way to use it.
And it feels like he's a guy that can play special teams. I think he was when he was mentioning special teams, he said maybe the running backs, who knows if they can find a spot. But it feels like Xavier Lucas, if you wanted to get him on the field no matter what and get him some time, special teams certainly would be a spot for him. One last thing. Back in the Big Ten Media Days, was asking Luke about some of the biggest questions going into camp. And one of the big ones for me was offensive line depth. Now, we've already talked about that. But the one that he brought up was defensive line depth. Because outside of James Thompson Jr., Ben Barton, and Kurt Neal, not a ton of playing time at Wisconsin for guys. But he said tonight that was actually a spot where he feels much, much better about.
Yeah, the fact that they moved Ernest Willer out to outside linebackers, to me, says a lot about what they feel like they have in that group. It's going to be the 6 veterans that are there, that are on scholarship. The 3 that Zach mentioned that have gotten the first-team work. It's 2 linemen. Generally, you'll see James Thompson Jr. and Kurt Neal, but Ben Barton can get in there, especially when they've got those 3 linemen. Brandon Lane, the transfer from Stephen F. Austin. Elijah Hills, the transfer from Albany. And then Cade McDonald. Lane, to me, has had moments that have really stood out as a run stuffer up the middle, just a big body who can be a playmaker. Will it translate to the season? To be determined. Luke talked about this last season that he wanted to have 6 defensive linemen that they could be able to rotate and keep guys fresh. It feels like they could be better positioned, but it's a wait and see for me.
Yeah, they have a couple of those spots. So, but last question: do you feel better about this team now than you did, or I should say, I feel better. You certainly know more about this team. Do you feel better about the group now than you did when we came up here for the first time on the 30th?
It's probably natural that my answer would be yes.
Because you have some more answers, right?
Well, and also you're going to see a lot of good playmaking. There's not the first day, notwithstanding, the first day was not a great day for the offense. I think it was like 6 fumbles, and you're wondering what is happening. That has not been the case since then. But yes, a lot of those questions have been answered. It's just always difficult to project what does this mean for how it will translate on the field during the season, especially against the best competition. But the questions about depth at a lot of those positions, it feels like, have been answered, and things look like they're operating a little bit more smoothly when you compare it to what we've seen in the past.
So, as Luke said, fall camp is not done. Fall camp is done in Platteville. They're going to be going back to Madison. They will get Monday off, and then they'll be on the field on Tuesday, and we will be there and back to break it down. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right. You've been listening to The Camp.